Innovation, the National Conference for Media Reform, changed the media, changed the world.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. We're a small group, and I wish we were speaking to millions, because we're going to be speaking about the most serious subject imaginable in the world today. Climate change is more serious than anybody realizes. It is a race against time. We are facing possible extinction with this one. There's no question of that. And you're not going to be able to mitigate or anything. The stuff you hear, that's just nonsense. No more than the boiling frog in the water boiling slowly when you're being told agriculture will have to adapt to climate change and these things. It's ignorance. It's terrible. I don't know what more to say about that, but let's get into it. As farmers and agriculturalists, which most of you are involved in, you have a role to play for the future of humanity greater than you probably realize, and certainly greater than the leaders of agriculture realize and comprehend today. So let me begin by just looking at agriculture first, globally. In our mainstream thinking, agriculture is treated as crop production. And you see that in the media and everywhere else. That is wrong. Agriculture, if you want to define it simply, is the production of food and fiber from the world's land and waters. That's what agriculture is. So that includes forestry, fisheries, wildlife, livestock, all of these things, food and fiber from our lands and waters. So let's look at the global situation of agriculture then, and what agriculture really is. And we'll look at that briefly. Globally, about 18% is cropland. America is just over the 18%. And we're not even talking about that much or doing much about it in considering what is going on. If we look a little further, and I've turned the United States on its side just to piss you off. Okay? No, I've actually done it because I wanted to cover Mexico as well. All right? So the area covered with the circle, over 90% of that land is only capable of feeding people from livestock or wildlife. Nothing else. And that's a big chunk of country. Now, if we look at the whole of North Africa, now you're looking at something far bigger than the whole of the United States. Most people have no comprehension of the size of Africa. Okay? And we take that right across Pakistan and so on to India. 95% of that land is only capable of feeding people from wildlife and livestock. If we look at the whole of the southern part of Africa, right up north of where I come from, the whole of that area, 90%, is only capable of feeding people, as I said, from livestock and wildlife. If we look at the former Soviet republics, right across that vast area of the world, which again is enormous, 95% of the land only capable of supporting people or feeding people from wildlife and livestock. If we look at the whole of China, which is again a big chunk of land, about 95% of the land only capable of feeding people from livestock or wildlife. And then if we pick on Australia, which is about the size of the whole of the United States, roughly, again we see about 95% of the land we're only going to be able to feed people from livestock and wildlife. And all of these areas I've shown you, if you look from space, as one speaker at a conference I was at some time ago said, and she showed shots from space as the Earth rotated, you would describe us as a desert-making species. All of that land I've shown you is turning to deserts. Desertification, land degradation. So it's a very serious position when, as you all know, livestock are vilified and wildlife is decreasing rapidly because of habitat destruction mainly. And that habitat destruction is principally being blamed on livestock, which are blamed for causing climate change with all the things they're doing. And we've got a population rising to an anticipated 9 to more billion people. So currently over most of these areas, as I say, they're in decline, desertification, etc. So what is the world going to do? And who's talking about it? What are you going to do? It is desperately serious. So let's move on to more reality. But let me first clarify what desertification is. It's a fancy term. It really is just a symptom. It's not even a problem. It's a symptom of biodiversity loss. Without biodiversity loss, desertification doesn't even occur. And yet we treat biodiversity loss as a separate issue in our universities, our organizations, our conferences. We treat desertification as a separate issue, even though it's a symptom of the first. And when we look at climate change, if we look at agriculture, it's producing more eroding soil than food. We're looking at agriculture as a whole now. It's causing the great man-made deserts. It's caused them. It's causing this desertification. Because of agriculture and the way we're doing it at the moment, we're burning over 2 billion acres of grasslands every year in Africa alone, and a 1.5 acre fire puts out more and more damaging pollution than 4,000 cars per second. And nobody's talking about that. It's supported by environmental organizations, governments, etc. Okay, when we look at all of this and put it together, the soil loss, etc., it's very clear, it's unarguable that agriculture is causing climate change as much as, and possibly more than, oil and coal, fossil fuels. But everything is being blamed on livestock and fossil fuels in the situation we face today in our mainstream thinking. What is even more dangerous is that when we, as we must, find alternatives for mass energy to fossil fuels, okay, if we find some technological solution to that, and it has to be a high-tech solution to that, climate change will continue because of agriculture. So agriculture is our most serious problem we're facing. You can't have a church, you can't have a school, you can't have a university without agriculture. It is the foundation of civilization. All right, so what is desertification? It's a symptom of biodiversity loss, but really what it is the rainfall becoming less effective. That's a picture I took when doing a job for the World Bank some years ago in North Yemen, and that was an inch of rain falling, 25 millimeters of rain. We were right close to a research station, and I took that. The next day, I took that picture. How much of that rain was effective? Maybe a millimeter? 24 millimeters? We said, thanks God, we don't need it, we're sending it back to you. We sent an illiterate villager to a conference of scientists in Harare, 200 scientists dealing with desertification, water, etc. We sent an illiterate villager there because they wanted to question him about the work we're doing. And he explained the work we're doing because he trained with us. Okay, the first question he was asked was, what is your rainfall? And he said, do you mean our effective rainfall or our total rainfall? What do you think 200 scientists said? They just stared at him. They had no idea what he was talking about. I attended 2 international conferences last year, one in the Negev, one in Africa. International conferences on desertification and water. I promise you there wasn't a scientist there that could have explained what that villager then explained to those people. That the rainfall becomes non-effective when you have bare soil. If you get rain in high falls, it runs off. Everybody understands that in floods. If the rain comes gently all day and all soaks into the soil, it merely moves up out of surface evaporation, and we can lose 80% or more straight back to the sky. And nobody's talking about that. And that is desertification. That's it. It's as simple as that. I've been all over the western United States for many years now, and seldom do I see a range in the United States, okay, where at least 75% of the soil isn't bare. More commonly, it's over 90% bare. Even on ranges that range scientists classify as good condition, it's over 90% bare soil. Such is our ignorance of what is going on. And it's not just here. In my own country, we had a major trophy, natural resources trophy, for the best managed rangeland in the country every year. It was a very prestigious prize, and Jock Thompson, Colonel Thompson, won it one year for his ranch Clonmore, and he asked me to just give him an alternative opinion. I got his managers to take me to the best land they had. It was beautiful. It was a sea of grass. Beautiful. Been awarded this top trophy in a country that was more conservation conscious than any country in the world. Okay, I got his managers to leave me there, pick me up at 4 o'clock, and I just took measurements. 98% of the ground was bare and eroding. And that had been given that prestigious award by range scientists. That it is a serious problem, our ignorance of what desertification is and where it's occurring. So whether you're crop farmers or small farmers, large farmers, or you simply eat food, it's the vast seasonal rainfall areas of the world that this is happening in, regardless of whether high or low. Some of the areas that are desertifying terribly in Yemen are 50-inch rainfall. And yet we're saying it's only happening in arid and semi-arid areas. It isn't. It's happening all over. And the soil, if we only understand effectiveness of rainfall, the soil is the greatest storage place of fresh water in the world. It's greater than all the rivers, all the lakes, all the dams you can even imagine. It's just what we save in the soil if we keep the rainfall effective. Most of the rainfall over the United States is non-effective, like these other places. Now, so all of this we're trying to address through the Savory Institute, and in our main strategy, which is to stop the hemorrhaging, because we can absorb the carbon, we can absorb the water in these soils if we do so over these vast areas. So we're focusing on that, concentrating on that as one branch of our strategy. Let me summarize it this way. The way we have run livestock for centuries has caused the desertification, caused these problems. It causes both water and carbon to move from soil to atmosphere, and the soil life to be reduce their capability to oxidize methane and deal with methane. The way we are running livestock now with a holistic plan grazing that I spent the last couple of days talking about and showing people how to do, okay, where we mimic nature and the herds of old and how they behaved, it tends to lead to both soil, water and carbon moving from atmosphere to soil, and soil life being more capable of addressing the methane and the breakdown of methane. So that's the choice. And nothing but livestock can do it today. There is nothing available to science except livestock, and yet we're vilifying them based on ignorance. That's typical good grassland, because people say dry areas are desertifying. And this is, I assure you, a random shot, because the police stopped my driver from speeding, for speeding. So while they were dealing with him, I took the pictures. And if we look into that grassland, about 90%, it's over 90% in that grassland, the soil is just like concrete. Any rain falling on that is non-effective. That's leading to the floods in Mozambique and the droughts that we're having in Africa. And that's good grassland. Typical examples of that would be policies in the United States. We've got agricultural policies, and yet we produce more eroding soil than food. When I came to the United States, the Soil Conservation Service 30 years ago was trying to get people to understand that, and they were saying it was equal to a trainload of rail cars, all full of soil, 116 miles long leaving the country every day. And now it's worse. The metric system is very useful because 1 millimeter equals 1 liter. I love it. It's so simple on a meter. So 600 millimeters of rain is 3 drums on every square meter. And even I can comprehend that. And so 30,000 drums is what we get on every hectare of land. Okay. If we look at how much rain we get, and we just take 2 inches, which is 60 millimeters, on 1 acre, and I put the metric system there so that I could do the arithmetic, that's 91 meters by 91 meters, 1 acre. Okay, that's 25 tankers, each holding 48 drums. That's only 2 inches of rain. And we get that in most places, and we're just throwing it away. If any new scientific knowledge comes in that is counterintuitive, goes against the beliefs of our institutions, it takes 100 to 200 years to get it into the institution. The research on that's pretty solid, pretty good. Lord Ashby studied that, looking at Britain and America over the last 200 years. And the example that's often quoted is the Royal Navy. Britain and the Empire, the Royal Navy was crucial. Scurvy was killing sailors at an incredible rate. 1601, Captain Lancaster sailed 4 ships to India, gave the crew of 1 ship lemon juice, no sailors died. The other 3 ships, 50% of the crew died. Pretty convincing. The Royal Navy, headed by brilliant men, a crucial problem, argued and discussed that for 150 years, till a surgeon in the Navy repeated it, did the first medical experiments, actually got scurvy patients recovering, and now he wasn't merely a captain, he was now a surgeon in the Navy, and they took a further 50 years to accept that. The merchant navy, on which Britain was even more dependent in many ways, how quickly did they accept it as an institution? Do you know? It took 70 years after the Royal Navy had accepted it. Now, we can say that's the Brits, they're stupid, we knew that, and that's long ago. We're not like that today. What about overgrazing? What's the belief of our institutions? All of them. Environmental, universities, governments. It's too many animals. Voisin discovered that that wasn't true 60 years ago. Published in 5 European languages, major languages, picked up immediately by independent scientists who are not getting a wage from an institution in Brazil, Cuba, New Zealand, Rhodesia. How many people have picked that up today, accepted it institutionally? How many governments? How many universities? How many environmental organizations? How many cattlemen's organizations? 0. That's 60 years after. And many more people are dying. Social breakdown, violence, war, because of that. And it's 60 years and we haven't got it into a single institution yet. Not one. It's just serious. That is a picture from space of the Negev. That is a picture before Christ, long before, of what was occurring. Those are stone walls leading to a circular area. And you have to ask yourself, why did people, before we had domesticated plants, before we had livestock, why did people build big stone walls to a small circle? Well, there was only one reason. That was to drive animals in to kill them. Well, there must have been millions of animals if you have built stone walls, permanent traps to trap them. Yes, there were. There were millions of animals. That's why only livestock now can reverse desertification. Nothing else can do it except millions of animals. And that was in the Negev. And what's there now? And I'm picking on them. I could pick on any nation, because Israel has more Nobel laureates than any nation. So you've got brilliant people, and what I found in the Negev is that the Israeli government is spending 10,000 euros per hectare to plant trees where there isn't enough rainfall to support trees. And they're taking away the livestock because of the fear of animals that we have throughout our institutions, okay, and they're settling the Bedouins in towns that they're making artificially, and they're paying the men an allowance on the number of children they have. So what do you think the men are doing? What you'd expect. I had the Bedouins put on dinner for me, and I had that dinner with them, and the mayor of the town asked me what age I thought the average age of his citizens was, and I said, I haven't any idea, you'll have to tell me. And he said, Alan, it's 12 years old. He's the mayor of a city that's the average age is 12 years. That's an unintended consequence. That's coming from brilliant people. I want to emphasize a point here very strongly to you. All of these agencies, organizations that I'm talking about, universities, etc., are full of caring, educated, brilliant people. I am not criticizing any person. Many of them are close friends of mine. They can do no more about it than I can. And many, I've worked with hundreds of them in universities, government agencies over the last 50 years, developing what I'm talking to you about tonight, but they were as powerless as I was to change the institution. And where they tried hard, they lost their jobs. Okay, it is a systemic problem of institutions. It's not a criticism of any individuals. What goes on in institutions is tied to many things, and I don't pretend to understand this wicked problem, but it's obviously related to how people communicate, seniority, fear, different agendas people have, pride, egos, security, the level of incentive, the leadership style, and much more. And it's like a soup and stirring around, and what comes out commonly lacks common sense and humanity. So it's a problem we need to talk about. It's the elephant in the room. It's not about persons or individuals. It's something we've got to deal with, because almost everything is run by an institution today, or controlled by an institution in some way. Now, good research shows us that our institutions are not swayed by facts. Evidence, data does not change it. The only thing that changes it is public opinion. Nothing else changes it. That's why it takes so long. Only when the public changed and the institutions are looking foolish do they change. So if we want to effect change in the United States anyway, it's only going to come through public opinion changing. Thank God today, internet is allowing people to communicate. It's stopped the control of knowledge, and that might be our savior. I referred to the Negev just now, and the only thing that can reverse desertification is livestock. There's nothing left now. Livestock properly handled. So we don't have any option but to put large herbivores in there as a tool and get over our fear of them. And that we've shown over and over again. That's what's been getting awards finally. But that has been vigorously opposed for nearly 50 years now, and that is only just dying down. I was banned from setting foot on any campus of any university in Southern Africa for over 20 years for what I'm telling you tonight. And that war is almost over. I was a keynote speaker at the Grasslands Conference a few months ago in South Africa. So that war is almost over. It's not personal. It's happened to everybody in history who comes up with new thinking. Okay? So we've got to put that tool in there, and we're doing that. Now, we had a problem then, and I could have, if I'd talked to you in the 60s, 70s, 80s, early 80s, I could have shown you incredible successes, but equally incredible failures. We were getting erratic results. I was working first in 5 countries, then on to 2 continents, And I was getting successes but failures. We just couldn't get consistency. And you know, in science, until you can get consistent results, you're not there yet. And we battled and battled. And the piece that was missing was the hardest to find, and that was what could give us a context. There was nothing in any religion in the world, nothing in any of the philosophers, nothing in any branch of science. What is a context for our actions in management? We just didn't know what we were looking for a vacuum and battling. And finally, with much battling, that piece fell into place there, and we got the idea of a holistic context, where you, in any situation, you define the area under management, the people under management, and people determine how they want their lives to be based on their deepest spiritual, material values and needs, and then what they have to produce from that resource base to live lives like that, and then what that resource base has to look like hundreds of years into the future to be sustaining future generations. And there's some rules around forming it and so on. And once we define that, then we have a context and we can work at it. And so we did that, and then we also found that because our human brains can't deal with more than two or three variables at a time, we needed a crutch to help us take actions that were socially, environmentally, and economically sound. Because you cannot make an economically sound decision unless it's socially sound. You'll live to regret it at some point. And you cannot make a socially sound decision if it's environmentally unsound. You have to get the decisions sound all the way, short and long term. So we needed a crutch, and we developed a simple 10 filters that helps us. And people learn to do this very quickly, and you can do this and make decisions faster than we could the old way. So there's what we're doing now, is trying to get people to understand that if we just use a holistic framework instead of the core framework, the core framework's in there, so it's everything we ever did, but it's just some additions to it, and then we start to be able to deal with complexity. I'm going to go straight into just talking about results. Let me just talk about two lots of results. Shortly after I came to this country, the Carter administration, USDA, engaged me to put about 2,000 people through training in the use of this holistic framework. Now, these were people from all the main government agencies, BLM, BIA, Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Old Soil Conservation Service, and from World Bank, USAID, and from all the land-grant colleges. So 2,000 was a big group of people that we put through training. They spent about a week learning to use this framework to analyze policies, etc. Now, a big sample of people brought their own policies to analyze. I never analyzed any of them. They did it. And in the analysis of all their policies using this framework, they never could find a single policy in the United States that would achieve its objective and not lead to damaging consequences. One group in training got into quite a heated discussion about it, and they finally came to a conclusion which we wrote down verbatim, and I put it in the textbook. They said, we now recognize that unsound resource management is universal in the United States. Okay, now nothing changed because they all came from institutions. And then the Reagan administration came in, there were changes, and all that training was banned. People were banned from any further training, and we're only now just re-establishing it nearly 30 years later. But that's, again, not because people are wicked or stupid, it's how institutions react to new knowledge. Okay, so that was one example. Incidentally, those groups got into many discussions of where these policies were coming from, and opinions ranged from the public to the media, etc. And I would always just let the discussion go until they hammered it out. And what it resulted in the end was never complete agreement, but the bulk of people saying it's coming straight out of our universities, where we're educating our professional people that advise government, etc. So it was just of interest. Now let me give you a more recent example from my own country. The our president is much vilified for good reasons, okay? But in the years immediately after our independence, when things were still going well, he made a statement that I think is one of the shrewdest I've heard from any politician. He publicly said, we don't have a bigger problem than our rising population and our deteriorating environment. He said, but we politicians do not know what to do. We can only follow the advice of our professional advisors. And when it goes wrong, we get the blame and never they. Now, that was a pretty shrewd statement. Do you think it's any different in any country? So, we had an opportunity about 3 weeks ago. I had the opportunity to put on a short policy workshop for 35 members of Parliament. So now I was getting straight to the lawmakers and not the advisors. And we have a situation in the country that you might not know is still pretty bad. So I had members from two parties that are, if you think Republicans and Democrats are in conflict here, that's child's play compared with what we've got. We're still killing people and torturing people and so on. Okay, so I had two parties there, 35 members of Parliament, pretty hostile situation. Our staff were terrified that I would tackle the land and agriculture policy, and so I said never mind what I'm going to do. And I dealt with those people. So anyway, with them, I explained what I've explained to you this evening. Just went through the stuff, the scientific reasons why governments can't formulate policies, etc. And when I finished that, I just stopped lecturing, and I said, now, let's just do it. Let's just get stuck in. I said, you're members of Parliament, let's just see if we can come up with the skeletal structure of a policy that would work, and why don't we tackle land and agriculture? So they agreed that we'd do that, and I needed a context. So I gave them a national, holistic context, how most of our people want their lives to be, what we have to produce, what our resource base would have to look like 1,000 years from now. Okay, and I said, now we'll break for lunch. I want you to all read that, change anything you want to. After lunch, they agreed, didn't want to change anything. It was a sound context for us to do that. And I said, right, now let's establish the principles that we need to work on. We need to remove the barriers. We need to release the creativity of our people, our farmers, our ranchers. There's enormous creativity in the people. Okay, we need to release that. We need to penalize what we don't want, anything that's unsound scientifically that's known, anything that's sound we want to reward, and so on. So yes, we agree on that. Are those in line with the context? Yes, no problem there. And I said, now start coming up with ideas. And they started coming up with ideas, and by day's end, we had the basics of a policy that the world is looking for. No difficulty at all. It's not rocket science. Okay? What happened there was, in that group of people, much more at loggerheads than you can imagine here, once we got a national context to look at, everything just soared above politics. Just soared above. Nobody dreamt of raising any political issue. If anybody had, they would have just looked foolish. But nobody even tried. Everything soared above special interest groups. They were irrelevant. Absolutely irrelevant. We got that context and we said, now, how do we come up with an agriculture that'll lead that way, be in that context? And it was incredible, constructive all the way through. What they came up with would have us very quickly be an exporting country again. Right now we're not. We're being fed by the world. It would safeguard the nation's waters, start healing all of our rivers. It would phase out unscientific poor practices, would just begin to phase out. Nobody would be told what to do, no instructions from government, leaving it all to the creativity of farmers. Okay, the livestock would increase greatly. 90% of Zimbabwe is only capable of feeding people from livestock or wildlife, 90% of our country. Chemical uses would decrease, monocultures would decrease, all these things would just begin to decrease, just by reward and penalty and so on. Corporate greed and domination would just start to disappear. and our idle land would be coming back into production, and government revenues would greatly increase at lower costs, and we would settle many thousands more people on the land in meaningful jobs, etc., out of city slums. All of this just began to become apparent. And one thing that I was expecting most of that, because I've done this many times, what was a big aha for me was that certifications, organic, grass-fed, things like this, would become absolutely redundant. Absolutely no need for them. Why? Because all food would be healthy, all food would be clean, all animals would be grass-fed. So these certifications are just a symptom of faulty policy. And that was a big aha for me to realize that day. Now the central theme of that, everything we did that day, working towards a national holistic context, was simply removing the barriers. That's really all we were doing. The barriers that are in every country to sensible thing. And the result, as I say, was amazing. I just want to remind you at this point that for thousands of years we couldn't fly. Then the Wright brothers learned how to fly, got the principles of flight. Within 70 years we were on the moon. Within 70 years. Why? Because of human creativity. And no government put any barriers in the way. We can do the same with agriculture. We can do exactly the same. The creativity amongst our farmers is just mind-boggling if we get the government laws, regulations out of the way. And talking about how to develop a truly regenerative agriculture, I don't like the word sustainable. I love Bob Rodale was the first person I heard talking about regenerative. It's a much better word. I do hope that you will not continue business as usual. We're running out of time. Climate change is desperately serious. Agriculture is a major component in it. Even, as I say, post-fossil fuels, we're still going to be in trouble because of agriculture. I hope I've given you some simple ideas, hope that it's working. This has been 50 years of work for me with hundreds of other people on 4 continents that have worked with me in developing this. We've tested, hammered it out, been through the fire. We cannot find the flaws in this, and we've even offered thousands of dollars in prize money if somebody will tell us where this is wrong, scientifically or logically. And the critics just remain silent and don't come forward to get their thousands. We just don't know what to do except get public opinion active and get this to lawmakers, the people that are held accountable that don't know what to do. So what we're doing, as I said at the beginning, is 2 strategies from our little institution, and one is deal with the hemorrhaging in the grasslands of the world, and the second is trying to remove the barriers, just those 2, because that's the areas that are most critical. And the trying to stop the hemorrhaging in particular and spreading the knowledge, we are endeavoring to do that by spreading what we call learning hubs around the world, about 100 of them, 40 in Africa. We have the first one in Zimbabwe, a second one forming in the Cape, and we're working with people now in Turkey, Denmark, UK, various places around the world to get these hubs going. And all that a hub really is a place where we can manage land, agriculture, on a piece of land, but have it locally led, locally managed, working in that culture, those people, and then link them through our institute and a platform on the internet so that they're all linked, using the same intellectual property and developing it and not letting it fizz out and go into sidelines, so that we can keep advancing with using the creativity of people around the world. So we're trying our hardest to get that in place, and I hope that some of you will become involved in that.
Are there hubs in the U.S.?
Not yet. We're hoping actually the first one will form up in this area, because we've got a lot of people here, a number of people that are highly trained, and a lot of very concerned people. And it's organizations, individuals. We're collaborating with other organizations on them. So yes, I hope the first hub is going to be up in this region.
How big
No, a hub is,
geographic unit?
no size. That's how long is a piece of string.
Okay.
No particular size. It's just to get people together. The first hub that we have is actually in Zimbabwe, near the falls. It's on a ranch, which is about 20,000 acres, which is our learning site, and that's having an incredible impact. We're literally being swamped by people visiting now. We have them from the Cape to Ethiopia, and it's just unarguable. We literally have run out of bare ground. We're preserving bare ground now for the wildlife, and that shook the people at Kruger Park when they came up and actually found us preserving bare ground, because the wildlife needed for social reasons. The giraffe, the kudu, and the various things come to these bare ground spots. And we've now got fresh, clear, open water after 8 months of no rain, where we've never had it for 100 years. Okay, and we've got water lilies and fish and geese now throughout the year, and all because we increased the livestock 400% and put them on planned grazing, mimicking nature, and they're integrated with the elephant, the buffalo, the lions, the kudu, the giraffe, the leopards, the hyenas, the wild dogs. We haven't killed a single predator. Yeah. So people are, it's really having an impact. That's what won the, not me, that's what won the Buckminster Fuller Challenge, out of 350 projects around the world, for the one offering the most hope in dealing with humanity's pressing issues. Resting land, what is the belief, what is the science? In the oceans of the world, the belief in the science is correct. If you overfish the cod and stop, the ocean will recover, the life will recover. Don't forget, coral reefs got wiped out once before, but they fully recovered, given a few million years. Okay? In the humid environments of the world, the belief in the science are correct. That's why the failed civilizations, when agriculture failed and we abandoned the cities, it didn't matter how damaged the land, it recovered, biodiversity recovered. But in the seasonal rainfall, now we're talking of 2/3 of the world's land. It's the opposite. That's land, that's a wilderness area, and National Park Service run it in the United States. That's had nearly 100 years, I think it is, of no livestock, no large herbivores. It's had a lot of money spent on soil conservation measures in it, and that's as bad as anything we've got in Africa. But because of our paradigm, because of our institutional problems, thousands of people visit that. Environmentalists look at it, brain scientists look at it, and don't do anything. And I could go on, but I won't, with more examples of that. That's a research plot. When the government wanted to shoot 50,000 Navajo sheep to stop the desertification, they needed proof. So they put in plots all over the western United States, and if you stop cutting your lawn, it grows. The grass grew, they photographed it. Shot the sheep, thank God they left the plots. And we can now look at them, they all turned to desert. California plot, turning to desert. There's a very important paper, Range Society, on desertification or climate change, and it's showing fixed point photograph, and the caption alongside that, that land had livestock taken off it in the 1950s, but processes resulting in the replacement of grasses and shrubs continued. What processes? It's a peer-reviewed paper. Nobody even asked what processes, because our beliefs are just so deep. The belief that overgrazing is due to animal numbers. I've looked at God knows how many PhDs, thousands of PhD dissertations, not a single one ever any evidence that overgrazing was due to animal numbers. The belief was so deep that that was it. There's Bureau of Land Management. You can see some of the soil conservation measures, these sausages full of stuff. I mean, we've given up in America. They've given up. They're not trying anything new. But we're out in the world telling people what to do. There's a picture 40 years ago. That's from my plane. That's one of the Bantustans that they had in apartheid South Africa. I was helping the cabinet of Laboa. We doubled the livestock, had them on planned grazing. You can see the border with South Africa. South Africa, they were jailing people for overstocking. And that was all stopped by the South African government. They threatened to withdraw all funding of Laboa unless they fired me as their consultant. So that collapsed. Again, this authority resistance to new knowledge. It's not new stuff, I'm telling you. We've got all our people on food aid distribution now. These are pictures taken at the end of the rains, end of March for us. The land is as good as it's ever going to be in the season, traditional running and then holistic management. Rivers are dry, end of the rains, full of silt. Boreholes are going dry. Once they've gone, there's no water. Every year is drought, it doesn't matter what the season. Now, we came onto our land just nearby, same soil, same rainfall, same day. Because we'd increased the animals 400%, our animals are always herded. Day and night they're on less than a hectare of land, moving around, mimicking nature, all to plan. We know months ahead where they're going, integrated with the wildlife, no conflicts. That's my wife, she's not a dwarf. That's some of the water lilies, fish. We've even got an 11-foot croc in that now. There's the water flowing on the same day, and that's what it was like when we began. And I know this property well because I donated it. It was a ranch I had and still had it at the end of the war. Okay. That was the same day. Top, water and carbon going to the atmosphere. Bottom, water and carbon going to the soil. Top, poverty, violence, social breakdown, recruitment to Al-Qaeda, all the problems you're dealing with. Bottom, happy people. These are fixed point photographs, just so we've put ring there. This one that's faint is actually, I wish you could see it on here, it's just beautiful grassland. That's all solid grass. It's not showing up well there. That's a pity. Gosh, I wish you could all just see this. It's just grassland versus bare ground. Same there, grassland versus bare ground. So all this yellowish color here is just solid grass. There's a farm in Australia showing up from the air, managed holistically. Mexican example, another Mexican example. There's an outfit down in Chile, and I'll be there in about a little over a week's time. And they've got 2 flocks of sheep, each 25,000. There's one. And they got a 50% improvement in the land and the livestock in the first year. And they're documenting it well. And one of our hubs will be starting down there. That's one of the reasons I'm going down. So you see some of the sort of results. There's the Karoo Desert, 200 millimeters of rain. That's a family that I helped years ago, and they sent me that picture of it. And this is the first ranch in the world that we doubled the livestock on the entire property. That entire property was just desert bushes and cryptogamic soils, you call them in this country, algae and lichen, that people are trying so fiercely to protect. The one thing in the world we don't need to protect is algae. But that's what that ranch had. And we actually measured 6 kilometers from one annual grass, not a perennial grass, to the next annual grass on that ranch. And then I told the rancher, I said, I'm going to have to stop helping you because I was getting so involved in our situation in Rhodesia at that time. And I said, just cannot afford the time to be with you. And he pleaded with me to go on. And I said, I'll do it on one condition. You put it in an airstrip so that I can land right on the place, help you move on. And so he graded an airstrip, and I saw it when I flew down the next time. It was just standing out in the desert. You could see it for miles because that little bit of grass where we graded the airstrip broke the rest. Rest is the most destructive tool known to mankind in these environments. And so I photographed it, and there's one perennial grass under the wing of my plane, and that rancher sent me that picture. It's the same place now. And just so you can see it's the same place, it's the exact same picture he then went and took for me. And we're now, I've always said we can't talk sustainability in agriculture until we at least get through 2 or 3 generations. because I've seen so many places where I was helping people and we had wonderful results, and then they'd have a divorce or something like that, and the whole damn thing would fall apart. Well, fortunately, we've got places down there, this is in the Cape now, where the grandchildren are now managing. And all the neighbours have gone, and they say they're only on the property because of the holistic management. So anyway, there you see some of the sort of results we've seen.
Could you explain a little bit more about how this holistic approach actually sequesters the methane so that there's less greenhouse gases?
Okay. There's no question livestock give off methane, no question. And if you didn't have the livestock, okay, what would happen to that grass? You've only got two options. You can burn it, and a 1.5 acre fire puts out more pollutants than 4,000 cars per second. Okay? Which is much more damaging. Or you can leave it to microorganisms to break it down, and what will they do? They'll put off methane. Anything that digests cellulose puts off methane. So you have no option. Now, even if livestock put out 10 times the methane that is said to do, you've still got no option. The only tools you've got, remember, are technology. No technology in the world can do what is required on the scale that's required to cycle the dead vegetation every year over billions of acres. So it's an impossibility even with imagined technology. Fire causes the problem, and small living organisms can't deal with it, and rest causes the problem. We have no option. So even if livestock put out 10 times the methane, you've still got to use livestock. Now, the area where the research is still shaky and poor and is increasing, some good stuff's going on in Australia, is what happens to the methane. It breaks down eventually, but they're getting increasing evidence, and I suspect they're going to get more, but I don't know that yet, that the soil life in a healthy soil breaks down the methane pretty fast. But that's one of the areas that's still shaky, need a lot more information. But even if that wasn't happening, you still have no option. If you didn't have the livestock, microorganisms would put off the same methane.
I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about the influence of genetically modified crops and how that helps or hinders this process. And then a second, maybe different question is, how do you start in some of those pictures you showed where it's very bleak and there's nothing on the soil? How do you actually bring the animals in and actually bring them food?
I mean, the GMO thing right away, the point is when we use the holistic framework, and one of the things is we make the decisions in a context, all right, and then if it's anything affecting the environment, we assume we're wrong, because the environment is so complex that it's beyond our understanding at the moment. So we assume we're wrong, and we monitor for the earliest possible warning so that we can back off. Okay? Now, unfortunately today, we use technology and we come up with things like genetic engineering of species and so on, and we should be treating everything as guilty until proven innocent. We don't. We prove them innocent until proven guilty. That is extremely unwise, knowing what we do about complexity. So my attitude to the GMO thing is, first, we do not need it. It's absolutely unrequired. So why take the risk? And already evidence is coming out of unintended consequences, and it's increasing almost daily. So it's an extremely stupid thing to be doing. Okay? Okay, so now, how do we begin when the ground is bare? Very simply. If this room was bare ground, trees, shrubs, a few desert bushes, and it could only, and it doesn't matter the size, okay, whatever the size is irrelevant, but this room was only capable of feeding 5 animals for the year, picking up leaf litter, whatever. Okay, so it's capable of feeding 5 animals for a year. If I divide this room in half, can it feed 5 animals here for 180 days? Yes, it can. What's that do to those plants that side? It lets them grow. If I divide the room in quarter and put the 5 animals in this quarter, can that feed them for 90 days? Yes, it can. What's it leave the rest of the plants on the 3/4 of the land do? It leaves them 270 days to grow. I just used a sigmoid curve. Every biological function is a sigmoid curve, and you need to let them get into the steep part of the curve. If I shave my face on one side every day, nothing grows. On the other side, it becomes quite a bush. You see, we're shaving the land every day. There are only two things that create bare ground over millions of acres, worldwide, all climates, everywhere. Only two things. What do you think they might be? Yeah, rest and fire. Too few animals wandering around and or fire. Nothing else causes it. Droughts don't cause it, termites don't cause it, nothing else causes it. Only too few animals wandering around or fire. And no matter how bare the ground, we can start if we use the biological sigmoid curve principle. And that's how we did. We've never had to feed the animals. The only place we've fed the animals is when we're doing mine reclamation, and it's a small area, no shrubs, nothing, just mine dump. Then we've fed old hay. And that's all, no reseeding. We've never had to reseed, never had to feed the animals. And we've been doing this for years. I was in Nevada once. Nevada's pretty bad. And I was in there with some range scientists, and they were telling me how this wouldn't work in Nevada because there's no seed. And to the one guy, I can't remember his name now, I said, all right, let's just talk about that for a moment. I said, why don't you, at random, anywhere you like in Nevada, just take a square meter of land, scrape off the top couple of centimeters of soil, put them in trays, take them to your lab, water it, and tell me if no seed comes up, and I'll send you $1,000. And he never asked for his $1,000. You cannot find soil without seed. That airstrip, when I landed my plane on it and waited for the farmer to pick me up, when he came, I joked, I said, thanks for planting the grass, it helped me to find the strip. He said, hell, Alan, I didn't plant the grass, I just put the grader on. That grass had been lying there for over 100 years. Just came up as soon as we disturbed the soil.
I think that's about it for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Thanks.